Welcome to the Poisoning Podcast. I'm your host, Erin DeLullo. Today I'm joined by Katie Herzog, journalist, podcaster, and author of the deeply personal new book, Drink Your Way Sober. Katie's work often explores the contradictions of modern culture with sharp wit, and in this book she turns that lens inward, examining her own complicated relationship with alcohol, sobriety, and the stories we tell ourselves about recovery. It's raw, funny, and full of uncomfortable truths that challenge how we think about addiction, identity, and change. Katie, welcome to the Poisoning Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Erin. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm been waiting for this book. Be honest, Matt told me about it first because he follows the social media more than me. And I was like, oh my gosh, Katie had a drinking problem? We know, so everyone knows people have drinking problems. They're just not aware of it.
Yeah. Yes. It's not something you tend to bring up at happy hour.
Well, I go to a ton of conferences for work, and everybody ends up at the bar till it closes. I mean, I can't do it. I'm just miserable if I were to do that. But I'm just thinking to myself, since I've started this project, wow, how much alcohol is consumed at just work conferences, which is every other week for me.
Yeah, and that's just the stuff you're seeing publicly. I'm sure there are plenty of people who continue after the bar is shut down, bring something up to the room.
It's a lot. And so I really enjoyed you literally talking about your experience with drinking from an early age, which I'll have to be honest, I never drank until I had children. So in my early
the children
30s.
Drove you to drink. Really? That is uncommon.
Basically, a little bit. I mean, not binge drinking, but there was no alcohol growing up. My parents didn't drink. My grandparents didn't drink. My aunt and uncle didn't drink.
Really?
It wasn't
Where
a
did you grow up?
thing.
In West Virginia?
In West Virginia. So there's a, you'll find very large families out here.
Yeah.
And a lot of churches who say you don't love Jesus if you drink alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah. Or fentanyl. I don't know what the church says about that these
days. That's just
alcohol is probably not the biggest problem. Yeah.
Well, I think sorry, we're going to get into this. That's a topic. We lost a bunch of teenagers to nitazines in my area this spring. Nobody talked about it because even at the church, if you talk about it, that means you're endorsing it or I don't get it. It's just they ignore it. Sort of if they gave you Narcan, maybe something bad will happen to you. And it's no, it's just in case people make mistakes.
Right. The harm reduction, sort of the anti-harm reduction perspective. and harm reduction, I think has gotten sort of a bad rap in terms of just the term. People hear that and they think of open air drug use and Narcan distribution in places like Seattle or San Francisco, where you do have these, fentanyl users sort of doing the fentanyl lean on the street. But harm reduction also saves lives. It just does.
Yeah. No, agreed. No one can have a second chance when they're dead.
Right.
So I was really please tell us about your drinking history. I was just very taken by it.
Yeah, so I grew up in Western North Carolina, so also in the Appalachians in the 90s. And I didn't grow up in a church culture. I was sort of surrounded by church people. I wasn't a part of it though. My family, my parents were carpetbaggers. They came from the north and settled in North Carolina. And so we were a little bit of an anomaly within my community because it was a very religious area, but people did drink. I think probably it was less common in families, but my peers drank, is sort of the kind of classic American high school games on Friday nights, and then everybody goes to the keg party afterwards. Although I would generally skip the football game and go to the keg party afterward. Going to a field somewhere and burning trees and tires and drinking keg beer. It's very healthy. So that was the environment that I kind of grew up in. Also a lot of pot and I'm talking young. Like I had my
Yeah.
first drink when I was probably 12. And I drank a lot in high school. College was very boozy. That it was actually one of the things I loved most about college was this sort of freedom to make my own choices, and I always made the wrong ones, but I had fun. Much less college was much less about academics for me, and it was all sort of about being social. And then after college, I drank more. So I went, I turned 21 and I was sort of immediately a bar fly. I loved bar culture. I loved dive bars. I loved day drinking. I loved hanging out with old men, mostly like unemployed old men at the bar. I absolutely loved it. And I did that for a lot of years. And I first recognized that I had a drinking problem in my early mid 20s. I was 24 and some things had gone really poorly in my life, and I had this kind of my come to Jesus moment where like, oh, why is my life falling apart? And it was clear in sort of one moment, like, oh, it's the drinking. All of this like pattern of behavior was no longer something I could ignore. And after that, I started going to AA. It didn't resonate with me at all. I didn't like it. I felt resentful of it. I didn't like the people there. I didn't believe them when they would talk about how much better their lives were sober. I thought they were lying because I literally could not imagine my life without alcohol.
Mm.
So I tried to quit for 15 years, sort of on and off. I had periods where I just was like, screw this, I'm drinking, and I sort of ignored the problem. And then I had periods where I was drinking moderately. I had some sort of short periods of sobriety. But I continued to be a barfly. I was very social. And then in my later years, my drinking got much more secretive, less social. During COVID, I was drinking a lot by myself while my my wife is a nurse while she was at work, and I was just doing it in secret. And it was during that period that I found a solution that finally worked for me. It was called the Sinclair method, and it's this medication assisted treatment that's based on an opioid blocker called naltrexone. So related to
Mhm.
naloxone, sort of.
Right.
They're both opioid antagonists, but they have different mechanisms and different purposes. And naltrexone is actually also used, not as common, but it's also used, it's FDA approved for the treatment of opioid use disorder. Not as common as things like Suboxone. But it doesn't get you high when you take it.
Right.
It's not psychoactive at all, so it dulls the pleasure that you get from alcohol. On opioids, it's just you can't get high. Like if you have opioids in your system and you take naltrexone, you'll go into withdrawal. So it's definitely
Painful.
something that very painful. It's definitely something that people who are on narcotics need to be aware of and talk to their physicians about. But for alcohol, it doesn't have that sort of effect. It just dulls the pleasure that you get from alcohol. So I took it in this very targeted manner. So I took it while drinking. So I would take the pill, wait an hour, and drink. And this is called the Sinclair method. And I did this every time that I drank for about 7 months. And every time that I drank, I got less and less pleasure from it. And eventually, I just no longer wanted to drink at all. So that's called extinction. It's basically a state of indifference. And that was 3 years ago. And I haven't had a drink since. And I don't think about alcohol other than the fact that I'm talking to a lot of people for this book. It really doesn't cross my mind. And that's been a very freeing experience because for me, addiction it was mental as much as it was physical. I really had this all-consuming obsession, compulsion with drinking for years, for decades. And naltrexone and the Sinclair method quieted that. So I don't even call myself in recovery. I say that I am recovered from my addiction, which I think some people bristle at because it's not an ongoing process. Like I drank for 20 years. I did this protocol and now I no longer drink and I no longer have the desire to drink.
I have heard before your book of naltrexone. Um, Ben Westhoff, I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
He has a documentary coming out
Yes.
on it, of course, focused on opioid use.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it, but I'm going to read this, and you can tell me if you agree with it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Despite naltrexone's many success stories, the backlash against it has been fierce, led by attacks from groups including the methadone lobby and 12-step programs. How is your feeling on that? That's Ben's words.
Yeah, I think Ben is right about that when it comes to opioids, and I think things
Yeah.
are really changing. So historically, groups like rehab
Sure.
clinics have historically been very against medication assisted treatment for various reasons. One of which I think is just that people who tend to work in those programs tend to have come out of 12-step programs themselves, and so they are doing what works, what worked for them. They are, so it's not a conspiracy. They're just like passing on
Yeah.
their own experience. And 12 steps, it's interesting. I think that if you read the big book, you can see that Bill Wilson, the founder of the program, the founder of AA, was very open-minded. He said in the book, "We do not have a monopoly on therapies. This is what worked for us." But despite that, culturally, AA has become very dominant, and in the rooms, and every AA group is different, and
Hmm.
the organization officially takes no outside position on any other issue, including naltrexone or Suboxone or anything like that. Their position is don't get between people and their doctors. But culturally, people in AA can be very dogmatic. And there can
Mm.
be, like, I talked to people when I was working on my book who had come from AA who left the program because their sponsors gave them shit about taking SSRIs. And
Hmm.
so, and every group is different though. I also know
Yeah.
people who are involved in AA who've done ketamine therapy. So it's a little, I think talking about it as a monolith is a little bit of a mistake. But Ben is right. Historically, there has been a real resistance to using medication to get over addiction because the AA ethos, the 12-step ethos, is that addiction is a spiritual malady. And how can you fix a spiritual problem with a medication?
Mm. Yeah, that's doesn't leave a lot of room for wiggle room.
Right. And I think that's a misunderstanding of what addiction is. I think for some people it can be a spiritual problem, or it can be, they have some deeper seated issues, trauma, depression, whatever that contribute to that. Trauma, especially early childhood trauma, is certainly a risk factor when it comes to addiction. But, you know, we know that nicotine is highly addictive, that cigarettes kill more people than
Yeah.
probably any other drug on the planet. And nobody says to a smoker, you have a spiritual problem. The problem is you need to get to the root of your problem before you quit smoking. Nobody says that. But when it comes to alcohol and drugs, there's this assumption that there's some underlying cause. And for some people, I think there is. But for others, for people like me, look, these drugs are addictive. And if you do them
Yeah.
enough, if you've exposed yourself enough to an addictive chemical, some of us are going to get addicted. And that's what happened to me. I didn't have trauma. I didn't have underlying conditions. I didn't have a spiritual hole. I just drank so much that I got addicted to drinking. And the solution that I found was not a spiritual solution, it was a medical one.
I don't even know why they have to be separate. Like,
They
why
don't.
couldn't you? Right.
They
It,
totally don't. Yeah, I mean, so there are people in AA who are on naltrexone. There are people in
mhm.
NA who are on Suboxone or methadone or naltrexone or whatever. The thing that is different about what I did, so the Sinclair
Mhm.
method requires drinking. That doesn't really work with AA if you were actively
Yeah.
drinking. But there are other support groups for specifically for people doing the Sinclair method where people can get that peer support, where they have the accountability, all the good stuff. The thing that doesn't really exist is in-person support groups for people doing the Sinclair method. There's been one, but they like one meeting ever, but mostly they're online, so you don't really have
Mhm.
that like third place, that getting out of your environment, which I think is also really valuable when it comes to 12-step programs. But I think it's completely possible to combine approaches: peer support, accountability, sponsorship, friendship, whatever, and take a medication if it's going to help with your cravings.
And I would think I understand the AA model of community, right?
Hmm.
Like you people were some people were drinking together as you
Yeah.
enjoyed.
Hmm.
So wanting to replace that with hanging out
Hmm.
with people who aren't doing the thing that causes you problems. I get having a group of people around
Yeah.
you. It just I've never heard of a Sinclair Methods support group, let alone,
Yeah.
the method. So,
Yeah. There was actually, so briefly, there was actually a Sinclair method rehab it was in Asheville, North
really?
Carolina, which is where I'm from. So I wish that it had lasted long enough for me to get back there and visit. It was this like very luxurious center called Deer Haven. It was just for women, and they had, I think, a max of like 6 women, and they happy hour was a part of the treatment. So you would do other treatments throughout the day, other, I don't know, probably yoga and walks in the woods and shit like that. And then you would have this kind of combination of like cognitive behavioral therapy and taking the pill naltrexone and then drinking. It wasn't like balls to the wall, drink as much as you want. It was much more regimented, and it was like, I can't remember the cost. It was like tens of thousands of dollars a month. And they folded after like less than a
And they
year.
only had
So
like six,
yeah,
you said six, okay, how it doesn't, I don't understand the math there, but
it was like a vanity project from some rich people who were interested in it. It wasn't, and it didn't make any money. And I guess they lost interest at some point. But I love the idea of it, a sort of
yeah,
rehab where you learn how to drink moderately. Um,
but not
yeah.
one that makes you go broke.
Yes. Yes.
We,
It could be something like at bars.
right. Well, what did, Ozzy tried to go to the Betty Ford Center because
Mm.
he wanted to learn to drink like in a classy manner or a more sophisticated manner. But I think he was misguided in what that was. I think, having studied a lot of what is going on, at least in more illicit drug
Yeah.
policy, I do think there's a lot of competition between pharmaceutical manufacturers and makers. And it wouldn't surprise me if, um, the makers of SUDs, like methadone, Suboxone, try to squash a cheaper alternative that might work for someone.
Yeah. So naltrexone has been generic for decades, so it's very
Yeah.
cheap. It was synthesized by like a small pharmaceutical company, and then that company was acquired by DuPont. And I talked to a drug rep for DuPont who was trying to get naltrexone in doctors' offices, trying to get them to adopt it when it was primarily being used for opioid use disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that doctors just weren't interested. Like methadone had cornered the market, and then it was later FDA approved for alcohol, and they just weren't interested. Like rehabs weren't interested, doctors weren't interested. It just went against the ethos of like what treatment should be, which is really too bad. And DuPont also was not. They just, I think it was partly that, but also they just like they're a chemical company. They
Right.
just weren't as well positioned to push pharmaceuticals. So interestingly, one of the things that I think has prevented naltrexone from being more well known is the fact that it's a cheap generic because no drug
Yeah.
manufacturer is pushing it because they could just be undercut by the drug manufacturer down the street. That said, you know, I'm a free market capitalist, and in this case, the market is sort of providing because there's a new drug that's out, and I haven't used it myself, but I think it's very exciting. And I don't have any like financial. I'm not invested in this company. I just think it's cool. There's a company called Or Health, and they do telehealth. So this is one of the great things that came out of COVID. People
Mm-hmm.
can see clinicians from states away if they don't want to get or can't get to their family doctor for whatever reason, or don't want to confess to their family doctor that they have a drinking problem or a drug problem. So Aura Health, they've been around for like 5 years, and they specialize in naltrexone. And so
Hmm.
people can, see their clinicians and get naltrexone shipped to them in the mail. I think it's shipped to them. It might be they send script to your local pharmacy. I don't totally know how it works. You pay, I think, a monthly fee for this. And there are now many companies that do this or there are several companies, maybe many is an exaggeration, but there are several that do this for naltrexone in the Sinclair method. But Or just came out with a new product that is patented. So there's not that much money from the sale of naltrexone, right? It's a cheap generic. But this new product, they're responding to market incentives, and it's a mint. It's a fast-acting naltrexone mint. And one of the problems with naltrexone is that it can come with side effects. So for me, the side effects were like a little bit of stomach upset. I felt really tired. That was kind of the big one, was just like exhaustion all the time, a little headachy, didn't make me feel good. And this mint they've designed it to eliminate side effects. I've never taken it, and I've never spoken to anyone who's taken it, so I don't know if that's in fact what happens. But I kind of love that, that here's a drug, it's very cheap, and this company is figuring out how to make it more expensive. I actually love that because it's an innovation in the market, right? And the way the market works in the US, like, you have to innovate to like patent to patent a drug that already exists.
So you can have fresh breath and learn to give up drinking all at once.
Exactly. Although mint and booze is not necessarily a flavor, like mint and beer. Maybe mint and
if
like
you're having
mojito.
Your mint julep, the one drink.
True. Maybe they should make different flavors. A red wine flavored mint, an IPA flavored mint.
Oh my God. Okay. That would be fun. That's how they market it. That's their Instagram. Yeah. This is, have you gotten any pushback? Like when you tell people you don't drink?
Oh, not
or
when
any
I tell people
negativity?
not when I tell people I don't drink. I mean, I have had pushback about the book. I got a scathing review in The Spectator. They had someone review it who is like an AA acolyte. The book is not anti-AA, and one of the frustrating things about this is that there are some AA people have read it and have said this book is anti-AA. It is not. I had an AA sensitivity reader. Like I am not anti-AA. I think AA is an amazing program, and it has saved so many lives, and it's free. The fact that you can find an AA meeting in almost any small town in this country, you can just walk in, is amazing. I really think AA fulfills a need, and it is an incredible program. I just don't think it works for everyone. So I have had some, the response from some people in AA is like, I think, resentment. And I think part of that is rooted in, like a genuine belief that the only way out of addiction is their program, is abstinence. I guess they missed the part of the big book where Bill Wilson said we don't have a monopoly on this. I think that's part of it. But I think also a part of it, and now I'm like armchair analyzing here, is resentment because, it's sort of like Ozempic. Like if you lose 100 pounds by counting your calories and eating oatmeal for breakfast every day and running and going to the gym, and then a pill comes along or a shot comes along, and now this person just has to take the pill, I'd be a little resentful of that. And I think there's that mentality too. Like the pill, the Sinclair method is the easy way out. You don't have to work the steps. You don't have to go to the meetings. You don't have to do this moral inventory. You don't have to make amends. You just take a pill and then you drink. Well, that's not fair. So I also suspect there's an element of that too. It just feels like cheating. But my feeling about it is like, who cares? Like addiction, as you know, is a huge burden, not to the addict and their family, but to society. Alcohol addiction kills 178,000 Americans every year. We should be doing whatever we can to save those lives and to lower the burden of cost on the rest of us. And if that's a pill or a shot or whatever, I don't care. Easy, like make it easy.
Yeah, there's just this mind thought in addiction that there's only one way, and it's the hard way.
Right. It has to be hard.
Has to be hard. And we treat them. I was actually just at a policy conference, and yesterday at breakfast, I was having breakfast. Lady, never met her until yesterday, and was telling her about my podcast. And she's from Nebraska, involved in policy there. And in Nebraska, if you have 3 drug convictions, you are ineligible for SNAP for life, SNAP benefits. And she used to be in the legislative body, the unicameral. I believe it's
Hmm.
only one house there. They're different in Nebraska.
Interesting.
She said, I voted against it. Like, she's like, why are we classifying one type of people with special punishments? Like, if you
Right.
assault a child 3 times and are guilty, you still
That's
get your SNAP
fine.
benefits.
Oh, that's
It's
really
fine.
interesting. Right.
But, and I'm like, if you start as a young person drinking or doing illicit pills and get caught, like, do you really think a 16-year-old's going to think, oh man, there go my SNAP benefits?
Right, right. A 16-year-old
Or
doesn't think that they're ever
17?
gonna die, much less like need food stamps.
Like,
Yeah.
what's SNAP?
Right,
Do you
right.
DoorDash that? It's
Yeah, actually take away the DoorDash. That might also be more effective.
that would, yes.
Yeah.
And so we had this whole conversation, and I think this goes back to all addicts have moral failings and have to be treated in a hard manner to get it out of them,
Right, right.
shake it
And the
out
thing
of them.
is, addiction itself is punishing. It is. It is hell for the addict to be addicted to something. No one suffers more than the addict. I know it might sound from the outside like it's fun to spend all day getting high. It's not fun. It's not. And for me, addiction was even more than the physical effects, the mental effects were just punishing, right? So having
Hmm.
something in your brain, it's almost like OCD, where like, but instead of having to wash your hands 50 times a day, all you can think about is getting your next fix or your next
Yeah.
drink or whatever. That is a terrible way to live. And to me, that seems like punishment enough. And I understand especially why family members um, would want some sort of accountability, want like maybe the pill seems too easy after you have hurt other people. But to me, it's like the faster we can get people and the more effective we can get people, the more effective ways we can get people to stop using the substance, like
Right.
get the burden off of your back, then the more they can address the other things that they have messed up in their lives. And that should be the goal, right? Is to have a healthy,
Yeah.
productive society where people are not engaging in antisocial behaviors.
So I've been to the Grove, which is at Ole Miss, and it is the
Mm-hmm.
biggest tailgating in college football. And I feel like if everybody just walked through there towards the end, even though there's some nice people just hanging out,
Yeah.
the amount of um, very inebriated college students, like
Mm-hmm.
who are outside their, I mean, they've lost their faculties by that time.
Yeah.
Just like, really, guys? Really?
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to like, I think a BYU game and they're handing out ice cream to everybody on both sides.
Yes, yes. I think Mormons are really the model for us all. I love Mormons. I stand
Yeah.
Mormons. And that's actually one of the things I have found really interesting about being sober is I lived because I started drinking at a young age and it was such a part of my social life. I really didn't understand how people could have a good time without booze. It seemed impossible to me.
Hmm.
And then I started following Mormon influencers on Instagram, not like the Secret Wives Mormons, but just like sort of like fun loving. Like they'll have these parties where they're all drinking like soda, not coffee. They can't drink coffee, and they're playing games and they're having such a good time. And I don't think they're having a worse time because they're not drunk. They're having a great time. Yes, they have like different lifestyle than me. They get married young, they have kids young, but they're still happy and they can still have a good time. And the reality is, in much of the world, people don't drink. In much of America, people don't drink. And we don't think, oh, just because it is fine. It is completely possible to have a good time when you're not drinking. People do it every day. And it took me a shockingly long time to realize that.
So do you socialize less? Do you find yourself to be more of a homebody now?
Yeah, but that started before I quit drinking. So I'm definitely a homebody now and I just moved out to the woods, so I like don't have any neighbors. I'm like some people would probably consider me a shut-in, a recluse. But I think that is more a byproduct of aging and sort
Mhm.
of I've naturally aged into what I was probably always meant to be, which is a homebody. And then when I was, 25, 30, even into my mid 30s, I was super, super social. I went out a lot. I had a lot of friends, and that is less of a part of my life now. And drinking is part of that. I will admit that parties are not as much fun when you're not going out and getting super high. It's true, or super drunk. Like, it's fun to go out and do keg stands and go sing karaoke and have a crazy night. Like one of the things about drinking and doing drugs is like there's this idea that you don't know where the night's going to take you, where anything could happen. And that definitely, you lose that in sobriety, or I lose that in sobriety, but I'm not 25. I don't need that in my life.
Well,
I don't want a night where I want to know where I'm going to be at 10 p.m. and I want that to be in bed.
amen to that.
Hmm.
How do your parents feel? Like, when did you tell them?
So I told them late. I told them after I signed the book contract. Like, after the
Oh,
book was written,
wow.
it was coming out.
Oh,
That was really the hardest thing. So I did
yeah.
this in secret. I was like drink towards the end of my drinking career. I was drinking in secret. My wife didn't know. Nobody knew. I did the Sinclair method completely in secret. I didn't tell people. And I told my wife, like, I waited until I'd been sober for a year before I told her. I wanted to see that it would stick. So I didn't, yeah. So we're still married, shockingly. Um, and my parents, so I told her, and then later I decided I wanted to write the book. And then I got the book deal and I wrote the book. And then I had to tell them. So that was kind of the hardest part, was telling my family that I had kept this secret from them. And also that I was writing a self-help book. They were very surprised to hear I was writing a self-help book. Not something anyone would have predicted.
How did they feel?
They were great. I mean, they were surprised, and I think everybody I told was like kind of felt bad for me that I had gone through this thing and I had not told anybody, and they probably felt um not hurt, but they probably did feel some sense of like, why didn't she feel comfortable coming to me? But
Mm,
I'm just that sort of person. This is not a good thing, but I don't go to people when I have problems. I didn't tell my parents, like my mom, when I got my period, like I'm that type of person. And so for me, it's very natural to not come to people with problems. Yeah, it's a personality flaw, but so, yeah.
wow, Katie had no problem. She was so easy to raise.
Right,
You know,
right. Oh no,
never
they didn't. No,
complained.
they didn't. I was not easy to raise. I definitely was not easy to raise, but yeah, I don't. So I don't know. I'm a weirdo in that way.
No, I have a 12-year-old right now.
Hmm.
I was like, well, I'm I'm a little type A, so I'm 99% sure he's not drinking.
Yeah.
They do have a big ice cream problem. We find them like taking whatever spare change they can find. I mean, if there's a dollar bill on the counter, it might go missing, so an ice cream cone can
Yeah.
be purchased.
Uh-huh.
Um, but now I'm like sort of even more like, oh my gosh, he could start drinking. Like,
You
and
know,
he's
I think.
and to I see him still as very young. Like he's
Yeah.
just, gonna change soon. But I'm like, I can't
Yeah.
imagine him like drinking.
I think that kids today are younger. And like my nephews are very different at 12 and 13 and 15 than I was. And part of that, like when I was 15, if my parents left town for a weekend, they would leave me home alone and I would take their car and I would drive around and then I would throw a party at their house and I didn't get caught. Now they would have a tracker on me and all the neighbors would have ring cams. And so just the we live in a teenage
Yeah.
surveillance state. It's just so much harder to get away with stuff. And I'm sure some of them still do. It's probably easier to smoke weed now because you can vape it, so the smell isn't there, easier to hide stuff. Cigarettes too, probably I'm sure, way easier to hide that than it was when I was a teenage delinquent. But I think phones have sort of changed everything. I don't
Mhm.
know that like, do they go to parties?
Oh, well, I mean, is it like a soccer party at the youth rec center for a birthday? You
Right, they
know,
do stuff like that.
yeah, one pill can kill, and they don't.
Hmm.
They may go to a church youth group party, which it could
Right.
happen there. I'm not
Totally.
saying anybody
Weird
it
stuff
can't,
happens. Yeah.
but they don't. But our oldest will turn 16 in a year, so
Hmm.
independence will occur.
Yeah. Yeah. I am curious. It does seem like I think it doesn't. It's not just by like I'm not sort of only speaking out
Yeah.
of my ass here. I mean, we do know that that every generation has been more coddled than the generation before.
Oh, sure.
And I think they are also maturing at a slower rate. We see rates of youth sex and drinking are way down. So it just seems like a totally different environment to me. I cannot imagine. I have nieces and nephews who are, the oldest is 15 as well. I
Mhm.
cannot imagine my, 10 or 12-year-old nephews going out to a party and drinking the way that their dad was and the way that I was when I was their age.
Hopefully, they don't listen to these
Yeah,
podcasts. I'm teasing.
and they don't.
No, I think it's a chance
I'm
to
not
be
worried about that.
open. Like I've told our oldest who went into high school, and again, I think he lives a somewhat sheltered life, but we talk about realistic issues. So he
Hmm.
goes to a small private school, but I was like, Burke, you're going to high school, new school. Someone could offer you what you think is candy, Advil. That pill could kill you. You
Yeah.
can't take it. You can't. To come from your parents or the doctor, you cannot take anything. And then I said, if you meet any kids who are doing this, just let me know. He's like, Mom, I'm not going to take a pill. I'm not, but I'm not going to snitch on the other kids. I'm not going to be
That's
that one.
realistic. I mean, that's
So
realistic.
I agree. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
if as long as you do not take the fake pill, I'm fine, and
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll move from
Yeah.
there. That's step
Yeah.
one.
Well, I mean, I think that's also part of it is that, when we were kids, fentanyl didn't exist. One pill couldn't kill you. The boogeyman was heroin, but it was like you had to shoot it up. And who wants to do that? Even opioids, like that was not a thing. People weren't stealing pain pills. I'm sure some people
Right.
were, but it was just like at my school, it was pot and
Yeah.
beer. That's what people were doing. And the consequences of pot and beer are a lot less than they are of fentanyl and whatever else is in the pills.
Yeah. Oh, whatever. Exactly. Scary stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's a wild time. You're right, they're coddled because I was just like at a great resort outside of Charleston, South Carolina, and when my eldest heard he was going there, and of course it's for work, for a conference, he's like, "Well, why aren't I coming, Mom? I like the oysters there." I'm like, well, you go to school that I pay for, so I'm not going to pull you out of it, You're fine,
Yeah.
son. You're fine. You're just
Yeah.
A-okay.
This
Oh.
is what happens when you raise a generation of kids to eat sushi. It's.
Oh, they down oysters. They love sushi. They've got expensive tastes. Well,
Hmm.
I really enjoyed the book, Katie. I thank you for your honesty and talking about it. I feel even with I meet people now all the time who've just given up alcohol. If I don't know them that well, I don't ask, well, why? What'd you go through?
Right.
Um, but I think there is more of a respect and
Hmm.
for it. And maybe when the kids are out of the house, I aspire to maybe drink less. Not that
Yeah.
I don't feel like it controls me, but is it great? We're learning more and more. It's not that great for y'all.
No, it's not. But I think that's the important thing is that it doesn't control you. You control it.
Yeah.
And as
Right.
long as you can maintain that relationship, I think nothing wrong with a couple drinks.
Exactly. Well, guys, go learn about the Sinclair method. Drink your way sober. Katie, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.